That was quite the introduction. I felt like Kevin must have given half of my talk away. That's okay. We'll get to see some of that stuff again. So as he said, it's a deep honor to be here today because HICSS turns out to be the very first academic conference I had ever been to. And then I thought, wow, academic life, score, right? It's all about Hawaii and paradise-like conferences, and then I started going to the other conferences, and I was like, okay, that's why HICSS is so interesting and special. So a couple of things before I get started on the slides. I wanted to say that all of the work that you're going to see here today, the work I've done, is work I've done with my collaborator, Martin Wattenberg. So you're going to be hearing a lot of we's. The we is basically Martin and I. And also a note about why the title of this talk is Visualization Culture. I really believe that we are living a special and sort of pivotal moment in terms of this kind of technology, data visualization. In the sort of 10 years or so I've been in this field, the change has been incredible. Visualization has gone from something that only scientists did, sort of like these guys here, serious technology for serious scientific insight, to something that's a lot more mainstream and something where a lot of different creators are involved and a lot of different audiences. And that, to me, has been incredibly inspiring. And so this is sort of what I hope to share with you today. It's sort of like the different facets of visualization and why these facets are so powerful and interesting for us as researchers. So even back in the 90s, when visualization used to look like this, and it was mostly done by men, and very colorful, there were already artists who were looking at how they could use visualization techniques to express things. So for instance, this is a piece by an artist named Jason Sullivan, and it's called Homes for Sale. What he did is he collected 100 photographs of homes that were for sale in 6 different cities in the US at the median price, and just overimposed them. And pixel by pixel, he averaged the color of those photos. And what you have is sort of this ghostly image, right? You don't see any given single home, but you have a ghost. And you can see at the top left there, that's Seattle, awash in a sea of grays, right? At the bottom, in the middle, you have Dallas boasting the greenest lawns that you could expect in the country. And then he sort of like used this technique for other things too. At the top, this is the class of 1988. And at the bottom, the class of 1967. So you can see a homage to bad hairdos, right, over the decades. And again, he's using these techniques for rites of passage, for artistic expression. And this is done in the 1990s. This was done circa 1998. And then he turned this to a racier subject. So these are all the Playboy centerfolds by decades. So you can see that the Playboy bunnies are getting lighter skinned and they're getting blonder as time progresses, right? So an interesting take on data visualization. Fast forward to 2006, this is a different piece named We Feel Fine by Jonathan Harris and Seb Kamvar. And what they did there, they decided to mine the blogosphere for feelings. So they were looking for things like for sentences that said, I feel, or we feel, or I felt. And then would try to understand the statistics for things like, well, how many people are feeling happy or sad or nostalgic or afraid? And then visualized the results online. So anyone can go, and it runs to this day, if you can get Java running on your computer. And you can see the different demographics of how people are feeling in any given day. And as we know today, the web, the visualization world has become news too. So nobody better than the New York Times to give us amazing information visualization almost every week. These guys are really pushing the envelope on what regular users see every day, readers, and the amount of data that they make available with any one of these interactive visualizations. So this, for instance, is the Obama budget for this year, 2013, and all the different pieces, and the different pieces are colored by whether they got an increase in spending, so that is the green, or what they got cuts in spending, which is the red. The New York Times also did this piece that I thought was interesting this past year because it was about the election, and this was not a visualization of historic data or a descriptive visualization. This was more of a simulation. Because the race was so close, it was hard to keep track of all the different scenarios and who would win if this state went for this candidate or this other state went to this other candidate. So they had different paths, a bunch of different paths that you could simulate to understand what the outcome might be. So this is incredibly powerful. Not only are we at an age where editors are fine showing tons of numbers to readers, they're also fine simulating scenarios visually. But we really know that visualization has made it big when it gets to the comic strips. So this is HICSS-46, whom I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, right? And what he's doing here, he's creating a timeline of different narratives. So at the top, we have the narrative of Lord of the Rings. In the middle, we have Star Wars. And he is tracking moments when characters come together and moments when they drift away, and how they come together and how they drift away. The interesting thing for me here, it's not only that he's super smart, and not only can he write comics and do interesting charting, but there's another backstory to this. In the last InfoVis conference, which is the top academic place for InfoVis publications, at least a couple of papers submissions were based on systems that were trying to automate this very chart that HICSS-46 created, right? So something that started in academia, in the ivory tower, right? Data visualization, really serious stuff for serious scientists, all of a sudden is taking inspiration from comic strips. This is wonderful. I mean, we've come a long way, right? So how did we get here? And this is where I'm going to start talking about my own work with Martin. And hopefully, I'm going to go through a lot of projects, and hopefully what you'll see is this path that we went through, where we also went through this transformation of thinking about visualization tools as scientific tools to thinking about visualization tools as expressive tools that can do a lot more than just to give you insights. Giving insights is definitely what you want with visualization, but I think that now we're being convinced that insights are only part of the story. There is more to it. So it all started in 2003 when Martin and I took a look at Wikipedia. And I mean, think about it. This is 2003. Nobody had heard about Wikipedia. Very few people had heard about it. And even fewer people had heard about what wikis were and what they meant. We took a look at it and we're like, wow, this community is coming together and actually building something. How are they doing this? How are they building? Like, this is the article on chocolate, right? And that Kevin showed you. And it has a table of contents. It has a picture. How are they doing this? So we noticed that at the bottom of every page, there was an edit this page link. And then every page was accompanied by the public history of all the edits. So this is like a log. And it showed who touched what, when, what they said, and so forth. We looked at this and we were like, this is it. This is what we need to visualize. Because it's an embarrassment of riches. You have endless pages like this showing you every little thing that happened to an article. So how can you make sense of this? So this is when we created History Flow. And this is how it works. Imagine you have 3 people working on the same document, Mary, Suzanne, and Martin. And I color each one of those people in a different color. And I say, okay, so Mary started the first draft of this article. So we're gonna color the entire first draft with Mary's color. It's just a line, and the length of the line is the length of the article, okay? Version 2, Suzanne comes along and says, this is great, but I want to add a paragraph to the end. So I have a little line there in blue, Suzanne's color, that's attached to the bottom, because it's at the end of the article. And so on and so forth. You see where this is going. Whenever we delete text, we shorten the line. Whenever we add text, we add depending on the location. To make things even more legible, we decided to connect pieces of text that survived intact version after version. And then you can start to see things like little holes for when content was deleted or when it was added. The other thing we can do is right now I'm showing you versions that are equally distanced, right? But I can also do this in real time and actually show you rhythm, right? So I can say, okay, between version 1 and 2, there was a long time that passed. But then version 3 came right away, right after that. And I can also highlight the text for each version, so you follow along actually reading the words. So let me actually show you what history flow looks like. And keep in mind, this is canned data because we did this in 2003. So this is the diagram for the article on design on Wikipedia. You can see that as I interact with it, the text on the right changes, okay? I'm actually going to move this so you can see a little bit more. Oh, I can't move too much, otherwise I lose my controls. Okay, let's look at something a little bit more interesting. Let's look at cat. So cat is a much longer article. But then I see an interesting thing at the bottom, which is sort of this antenna that doesn't go anywhere. So what happened there? What kind of content was put there? If I bring my wand here, I can see that it was a bunch of paragraphs in white that are about the Unix command cat. I knew this audience would resonate. So what happened with that, right? This is a page about cats, and someone put the Unix command cat. It just got deleted. So if I go to the next version, I see that it didn't just get deleted. It got redirected to a new page called Cat Unix. And this is how people started navigating and collaborating around what kinds of content should be part of a given page or not, or were related in some way. So let's look at one of the examples that Kevin showed. The abortion diagram. This is a very complicated article, as you may imagine. It's extremely long, and it got a couple of dashes there. Those gashes, those black gashes, are vandalism. So if I go all the way here, I see that the entire article got deleted. Okay? If I come to the second gash, not only did the article get deleted, someone said abortion is great. And then they came back and said, ooh, abortion is good. And then it got reverted. Now, one of the things that was interesting to us was to see when things were happening. So when I highlight a version on this visualization, at the very bottom here, it might be hard for you guys to see, I have the date stamp. So at the bottom, the vandalism there took place on the 17th of December at 4:06. Okay? If I go to the next version, it got reverted on the same day at 4:07. It took a minute. Okay? And we started seeing this pattern over and over again. And we were like, how are they doing this? In fact, if I show the same exact information, but spaced out in real time, you lose those gashes. Those gashes aren't there because they're so fast, they happen so fast that they don't even show up. So we actually got in touch with Wikipedians. We're like, how are you guys doing this? We're seeing this on our diagrams. How is it possible? So they told us about something called a watch list, which is whenever you edit a Wikipedia page, you can sign up for it to be watched by you, for you to watch it. So whenever someone touches that page, you get notified. And we were like, okay, so are you watching 1, 2 pages? They're like, oh, no, we watch hundreds. Some of us watch thousands. I'm like, That doesn't make any sense. How are you doing this? So a couple of things is that many people will watch the same page, but the other sort of technique is if you see a name of someone that you trust and they have touched the page, you sort of don't bother about it. But if you see an IP address that you don't recognize or a new name, you might want to go check it out and make sure it's not vandalism. And that's how the community sort of takes care of these mass deletions. And then finally, my favorite page, which is chocolate, as Kevin showed. When you see it real time, not very much happening, but when we space it out by versions, you get the zigzag, right? And the zigzag is an edit war, where basically what happened is back here, this guy called Daniel C. Boyer at the top, it might be hard for you guys to read, added this little piece of white text, which is a paragraph that says here, extremely rarely, melted chocolate has been used to make a kind of surrealist sculpture called collage. It survived for all this time, and then someone said, removing Boyer invention. Daniel C. Boyer comes back and says, reverting, collage is not a Boyer invention. Well, Google search for chocolate collage finds only Boyer. Reverting. Leave your humbug out, reverting. And then so they go on and on until Daniel C. Boyer sort of gives up, which is too bad because we did a Google search and it does exist. Another thing we found out is if you get rid of all the authoring colors and you just color text by the age, you just make the text darker the older it is, you get some interesting patterns, and we're using darker here, older text, as a proxy for quality, because if you have text that survives intact in a situation like Wikipedia, it could very well be that that means it's good, stable text. And as you can see, as I go down here, there's such dark text that it's even hard to see. There's a lot of dark text, which means that there's a lot of good, stable text here. So let me get out of history flow, and let's go back. Oops, where am I now? I think I am where I want to be. Yes. So we did history flow as very much a scientific tool. But we got interested in the fact that people were starting to create visualizations to talk about data and to have conversations. And we decided, okay, how can we design something? How can we design an environment where conversation and sharing is part of what you do with visualization? And that's when we created Many Eyes, which is the website where anyone can go. It's open, it's free, it's public. Anyone can go, upload data, visualize that data, and share these visualizations with the world. And let me show you what Many Eyes looks like. So this is Many Eyes. And you know, every day a few visualizations get highlighted, they change you know, as time progresses. But let me show you what happens when we have a specific visualization. So before I go here, just doing a little experiment, thought experiment. If I am to show you a map of alcohol consumption per capita, per country, who do you think would be the champion consumer of alcohol? Finland? Okay, Finland. Who else? Russia? Okay. Ireland? Okay, these are all good. All right, this is the map right here. Someone created it on Many Eyes. So let's take a look at Russia. Am I on interactive mode? Oh. Let's hope. Let's hope I have internet connection. Oh. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We are going to quit out of Firefox. Yes, O is right. No, do not report that. And let's start Firefox again. Just give me 1 second. That's what happens when you do live demos, right? You live dangerously, very dangerously. Okay. Yes, it is embarrassing. I agree with you. Let's see if you can Let's try. Okay, while this is coming up, oh yay! I think we're good. Look at that. Look at us. We're so good. Okay, so Russia has 10.3 liters per capita. England 11.8. Ireland 13.7. Ireland, so far so good. It's one of our Finland 9.3. What about Portugal? 11.5. Okay. Let's make it short and look at Africa. Uganda, 17.6. Right, so what does this mean? Is the data incorrect? Because we also looked at this map and we were like, there's no way. What do you mean, Uganda? Is this data incorrect? Is this an incredible outlier that few people had heard of? What's going on? So this is the thing about Many Eyes that was so exciting, was that every visualization was an opportunity for conversation. So an interesting, really interesting conversation happened here. And, you know, one of the people said, okay, for the story on Ugandese alcohol consumption, check out here, seems like it's a national epidemic. So in fact, there was a major crisis in Uganda, and men were really going out of control with alcohol. So that's interesting point number one. Interesting point number two was that part of that conversation was talking about the fact that there's this whole swath of countries here that has very, very low consumption of alcohol. And so someone said, what's going on with that? What's going on with Africa? To which someone else said, let's look at, oh, it's coming up, the Muslim population in different parts of the world, right? So this is the percentage of Muslims in different countries. And what you can see is that you almost have a reverse map of what you had before, right? And this is exactly the kind of conversation that we wanted to have happen on Many Eyes, where it's data-based, where people are creating hypotheses or trying to see if their hypotheses are right or not, asking questions, other people are answering questions, pointing to new pieces of data. And so it was good to see that this kind of conversation is possible with the kind of technology that we have. Then I have another thing I want to show you before. This is a very different kind of visualization. This is a tree map of city versus highway mileage for different cars. So each one of these little rectangles is a car model. I can, you know, Eclipse, Silverado, Santa Fe, Rainier, so forth. The color of each car happens to be the difference between the mileage that they do on the highway versus the city, okay? So the better they do on the highway versus city, the bluer the car is, which is what you would expect. Except that there are a few cars here who do exactly the opposite. These are the orange cars. They're doing better in the city than they are doing on the road. So what's happening? So one of the things that you can do with this kind of visualization is you can change the hierarchy and the way things are organized. So I can bring up manufacture. Does bringing up manufacture give me something? Well, I can see that a lot of the Toyotas have the oranges there, right? So this is a Highlander, Prius. I think you're starting to get what I'm getting at, right? But the real cool thing is when I bring up transmission, boom, everybody's here in a nice little package. So these are hybrid cars that have a specific kind of transmission that makes them do so much better in the city than they do in the highway. Part of the reason why I'm showing you this is that this is a kind of visualization that was deemed very, very sophisticated by academics, because it's a hierarchical visualization. It's what we call a space-filling hierarchical visualization. It's a tree map. And nobody, in fact, when we launched Many Eyes, we're like, should we do a tree map? Is it going to be never used? What's going on? Will people get it? And to our surprise, not only did people get it, they were using it in creative ways. So, for instance, this person here, and it's loading, that created this visualization for their wedding. Okay, so they created a tree map for the wedding. Each rectangle there, instead of a car, is a person. We're coloring this. The hierarchy right now is whoever said yes, we're coming to your wedding, versus no, we're not coming to your wedding. So thankfully, the wedding goes on because most people said yes, we're coming. You can also see that there's quite an elaborate hierarchy at the top here, right? So we have confirmed at the very top. But if I bring detail category, I have another interesting aspect to the wedding, and I can see their parents' friends, cousins, aunts and uncles, brides' friends, and so forth. There's another way of looking at this wedding, which is to bring country. And I can see it's USA and UK. So it's an international wedding. How interesting. And then my favorite, all-time favorite, is age. I'm going to bring age all the way up. And we have young folks and old folks. I don't know what the threshold is. I don't know if there are any middle-aged people there, but it's either young or you're old. But think about it. This is interesting. This is personal data, very, very personal, right? And this person was extremely sophisticated because they decided to use a tree map for this. They created this entire hierarchical system. They didn't give anything away. I don't know who they are. I have no idea who these people are. It's completely anonymous, right? And it's interesting to look at. The final thing I want to say about Many Eyes is that when we first launched, we had about a dozen techniques. They were all geared towards numeric data, such as this. And yet we saw people immediately uploading text. They wanted to visualize text. So one of the things we did first is what Kevin showed was sort of the word cloud, but we wanted to do better than the word cloud. So we started creating different kinds of techniques for visualizing text. And one of them is called the word tree. The word tree takes a body of text, in this case, the entire King James Bible, and looks at repetition. I do a search. My search here is "and God." And the word tree shows me a tree of everything that comes after that phrase, "and God." It takes care of repetition in the sense that it makes the font size bigger the more frequently that phrase is shown. So I can see that God said lots of things. Well, what did he say, or she, or they? And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be a firmament. So what happens is that we go from a very macro view of the text to a very detailed view very quickly. I can go back and I have everything that God said very quickly, right? I get macro patterns and I get things in context, which is one of the things that word clouds will not give you, right? They just look at keywords. You don't know how that keyword is being used in the text. So this does that to you. And then, because it's Many Eyes and people will upload all sorts of interesting data sets, this is a tree map of personals ads, of males that say, I am married. And so they're all married males. Exactly. That are looking for companionship. And the thing I love the most about this data set is the difference in philosophy. I am married and looking. I am married but looking, right? So I am married and looking for someone, and I am married and plan on staying that way, or I am married but looking for a discreet encounter, and so forth. So, different approaches. So let me get out of Many Eyes here, and let me show you the one last thing I want to show about Many Eyes, which is another visualization of text. And here, what we were interested in was a notion of a map. We wanted a network of concepts. If you could distill concepts from a corpus of text, how would you do that? So lots of people have done this before, and they have done it in very sophisticated ways, right? You look at semantics, you look at lexical analyses. We wanted to do it the dumb way. We're like, how can we get away with just like repetition? How would repetition help us? So we created something where you create a template of words, and then you just look for repetitions of that template. So imagine you have two words, And they are connected by whatever word you chose. In this case, we chose and. This is not a Boolean. It's just the word and. It could be any word. It could be red, yellow, over, under. It doesn't matter. Okay? So what the PhraseNet does is that when you enter any text, it looks for those patterns. So for instance, if we were to look at Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, one of the pairs we would see is pride and impertinence. Well, the PhraseNet takes that and creates a couple of nodes with an edge, right? Pride, impertinence, and the edge there is the word and, okay? When I run the entire book by this same template, I get interesting clusters. So at the bottom right there, I get the social network of the book, just by this mere repetition, okay? I have Jane, I have Mr. Bingley, I have mother, uncle, aunt, and then I also get conceptual clusters too. I have pride, which is connected to conceit and impertinence and folly and vanity. How interesting that all these sort of negative concepts are connected together, which is different from another cluster at the top there with amiable and pleasing and affectionate, all sort of positive concepts. If I change my pattern that I'm looking at, and instead of and, I look for word at word, I get a network of places in the novel. Okay, I have things happening in Netherfield, in Longbird, in Pemberley. If I zoom in, I see that people are assembling in Longbird, they are reappearing, they are stopping by, and so forth. Let's think about a different book. Let's think about the Bible and change our template to X beget Y. All of a sudden, I have a family tree of the Bible with an interesting little circle at the top that I'm going to zoom in. And you can see who begat whom. If I do this for both books of the Bible, and I change to X of Y, we get the New Testament and the Old Testament. Children of Israel, King of Israel, Son of God, Kingdom of God. And I'll let you decide which is the Old Testament and which is the New Testament. So again, low-hanging fruit, an interesting way to just maybe look at this data and you know, how much can you get away with just interesting repetition, for instance, in text in this case. So Many Eyes has a lot of different techniques that I can't get into, but what were people doing with this, right? So very quickly, a couple of days after we launched Many Eyes, a user named Crossway uploaded a co-occurrence data set to Many Eyes on biblical verses. So whenever you have a verse of the Bible and you have two names in the same verse, that became a data point. He created a social network of the New Testament. You can imagine who's the big dot in the middle. He went back to his blog and blogged about it, and immediately started getting hundreds of responses. This is 2007, okay? That's when we launched Many Eyes. So it was a big deal to be able to do this kind of thing. In fact, within a couple of days, this visualization made the rounds out of the Christian blogosphere and all the way into places like Boing Boing and YouTube. People were creating, this is a screenshot on the right there of someone who created a YouTube video of himself exploring the visualization and what kinds of hypotheses he had and things he was learning about the data set. And then that, in turn, inspired other people who had data sets about the Bible to go to Many Eyes, upload their data, visualize it, and then share and continue the conversation. So this was very much early on. It was a couple of days after we launched. But it was definitely sort of the textbook example of what we would hope would happen with Many Eyes, which is you have a community that has data, that is interested and savvy about their own data. Can we give them interesting tools with which to play with the data and sort of charge the conversation that they have? And then, you know, can this become sort of virtuous cycle where more people add to the conversation and more data is shared. So this is one example of things that were happening. Even though we created Many Eyes for lay users and not for experts, experts kept coming to Many Eyes. So these are just a couple of screenshots of a historian who was finishing his PhD and was very much intimate with his data set, but because of Many Eyes was able to glance a couple of discoveries on the parliament data he was looking at. This is a linguist who was looking at language formality on corporate blogs and used a bunch of different techniques on Many Eyes to sort of help his master thesis. This is a geneticist looking at microarray data. He created, oh God, I don't know, like dozens and dozens of these tree maps, and they looked beautiful to us. We have no idea what they mean or how they work. But he wrote to us and was like, I just made a couple of really interesting discoveries. Can I use the Many Eyes visualizations for a publication? We're like, yes, of course. That is the whole purpose. Please do this. So it was a moment where, for us, it made very clear that visualization really could be used not only by experts, but it could be designed as something that is a lot more accessible and something where the social aspect of visualization is part of what is designed from the ground. And that makes a big difference. It's not, visualization should not be thought of, as it has historically been, as a single person, single mind sort of tool. A lot of times it's a lot more potent to think about it as a social tool. So speaking about social, let me jump in fast forward and talk about something we launched last year, which is the Google Plus Ripples. Here, we're interested, obviously, in how information flows in a social network. One of the big differences for us for a project like this is that everything we had done up to then were visualizations that existed outside of the environment where the data happened to be gathered. This was the first time we were going to do a native visualization, where the visualization itself was part of the ecosystem of where the data was being produced. So let me give you a quick sense here. Oh. Here, okay. So this is Google+. It's the social network at Google. And not at Google, from Google. And you have here, what I chose to show you is, I did a search for the Bark Side. Bark Side is a video it's a commercial that Volkswagen put together for the Super Bowl last year. It's basically a bunch of dogs barking the Star Wars theme song. And it got shared, as you can see here, people were sharing it widely on the social network. And what we wanted to visualize was, what did this sharing activity look like? If I said, okay, look at this video and tell me everybody who shared it on Google+, what would it look like? So let me see if I can get back to this. Yes, okay, so this is what the visualization looks like. In the center is Volkswagen. Volkswagen is the originator of this URL. They posted the URL to Google+, and then we draw an edge between Volkswagen in the center and any of the followers from Volkswagen who reshared their video. Okay, so we have a little tree. This is a tree, okay? But this doesn't seem very viral at all, right? So let's go back to Google+, and let's look at everybody who shared this video. And this is more like it. This looks more viral to me. So this is everybody who shared this video. And I can mouse over and can see, ooh, Chris Pirillo, his big deal here. Has tons of followers who reshared this video. This person reshared from him, and Sarah reshared from Josh, and so forth. So I can follow the thread. This other person, also influential, right? And you can see, you can follow along the little threads of sharing. In fact, if I look for Volkswagen here, Where are they? Let me see. Is this it? Yeah. This is Volkswagen right here, this little tree. Let's zoom in. It's exactly the tree we were looking at before. But isn't it interesting that Volkswagen is such a tiny tree compared to everybody else? So this is one of the things that we usually talk about, but it's hard to quantify. It's the fact that these individuals are a lot of times a lot more influential on these networks than an official company or channel, right? So let me talk a little bit about the kinds of patterns that we started seeing. So this is what we're calling a celebrity pattern. When you have someone, in this case Felicia Day, who has lots of followers, and she shared a video link, and immediately tons of followers reshared from her, and then it fizzled out. It's sort of like, this is it. This is all the activity. It's not deep. It's very broad, but it's a shallow tree, right? That's very different from a graph, a sharing graph like this. This is the sharing graph for a petition to the White House to open up scientific journals. And you get different communities, different influencers here. This at the bottom is the timeline of activity, of sharing activity over time. So you can see that it starts strong, it has a couple of bursts, and it dies out. Then we get Tim O'Reilly, usual suspect, right? And he has a bunch of, and then boom, it spikes again, and then it goes on. So that to me looks like a much more interesting sharing graph. And so one of the things you could imagine doing is looking at the shape of the virality of any given link and trying to draw conclusions around that. Here is another very different sharing graph where we do have a couple of, I would call, celebrities, but they are not the only ones, and it's a lot more distributed than that. And then finally, this sharing graph is very dear to me because it is the sharing graph of one of our own visualizations. This is the sharing of the wind map that I'll talk about in a little bit. But why is this interesting? This is interesting because it becomes a mirror, right? It's me looking at my own content. I am not nearly as influential as any of these people here. In fact, I'm a little bubble here. I share it. I'm like, hey, this is our visualization. Martin shared too, and we're just little bubbles there. And then the interesting thing is to see what kinds of people were interested in this. So for instance, this person here is a very high up executive at Google. I had no idea he was interested in visualization. This person is a mathematician who has a big following. This person is an author. Someone else here, if I can find them, is from the New York Times. So it was really fascinating to see the different kinds of communities that were coming together and talking about this visualization that we didn't even know were interested in this kind of work. So I think with that, because I think I'm running out of time, how much longer do I have? Oh, okay, 5 minutes. So let me just move along. Let's talk about visualizing wind, since I just talked about that. This was an interesting and unexpected little project. Martin and I looked at government data that's available from sensors on the wind. And I think it was because we were sort of going through a pretty harsh winter, nothing like Hawaii, and the weather was on our minds. And we were like, okay, how do you visualize wind? And it's not like it hasn't been done before. I mean, weather maps are everywhere, and wind maps are everywhere. But still, we were like, can we do something that's different and that speaks to us? And so that's what we decided to do. And I'm going to take you into our studio a little bit here and show you that things may not be as obvious as you might think at first. So, what is wind, right? How can we visualize wind? You might think that our solution was pretty obvious. And let me tell you, it was not obvious to us. So the first thing we did when we got the data was to run a little vector field and make sure that we were getting good data. So this is the world, and these are just vectors. And we made it this very bright green in a black background to remind ourselves that this is exactly not what we wanted. So at the top, you can see the US sort of silhouette there. At the bottom, you can see, North America, South America here. And this is okay, but obviously, we wanted to experiment with animation. What is wind if nothing more than particles moving around, right? So we decided, this is perfect. We're just going to get particles to move around, and it's going to be perfect. So let me show you what particles moving around looks like for the wind. So this is the world, and this is the wind all around the world. As you can see, it's very legible. It looks like little critters, and it doesn't give you a sense of overall patterns at all. So we looked at this. We're like, oh, maybe it's because we're doing the world. Let's not do the world. Let's do the US. And then we're going to have a shape. We're going to have boundaries that we are familiar with. It's all going to be good. And this is what the particles look like. So you do have a shape. It does help. But if I ask you, so what is the wind doing there? It's pretty hard to tell. Okay, so then we thought, oh God, we're thinking about this totally the wrong way. We should not, you know what really we should have is colors, lots of colors, areas, big areas on the map that flow with the wind so you can see the direction where things are going. And this is going to be perfect. So this is the next thing we tried. Areas, colorful areas that flow. Exactly, and it melts your eyes, right? And it's sort of like this psychedelic trip that you're taking with the wind. So this is really showing you how the wind sausage is made. So that didn't work out so well. So we decided, okay, let's go back to our particles. But instead of just having little particles that just move around, let's do that, but let's add some transparency. And let's just have them leave little traces. That's all we're going to do. Maybe the traces, that's what we're missing. And this is what happens when we add traces. So that's when we thought, okay, we're on to something, finally. We're away from the little critters, and we have something that flows and doesn't hurt our eyes. That's a good place to be. So these are the kinds of little tweaks that we made. And this is not the final thing, but it's pretty close. From here, it was a question of making it more polished, where we decided to give it more brightness, where the speeds were higher. So let me just show you, actually. Let's go to the wind map. And let's look at the live wind map right now. Let's look at what the wind looks like right now. And so, interesting pattern. Nothing too dramatic. It was interesting because when we first did this project, Martin being the American and me being the Brazilian, he's like, oh, I don't know, because really wind in the US is all from west to east, and that's what it is. And I was like, okay, I don't think you're right. I think you really don't know what you're talking about. And so, and sure enough, it's not, right? And one of the things that was so exciting about this project was to understand the different patterns every day and how much the patterns change. So this is pretty dramatic. You can see this sort of harsh line in the middle of the country. You can see days like this where we had a lot of things going on in the Midwest and the southern part of the US. This was actually a week when we had a lot of tornadoes. The other thing that you can do is actually start zooming in and seeing more specifically the different parts of the country and just seeing it flow, which can be sort of mesmerizing sometimes. Just want to, zoom in, zoom out, look over here at the Rockies and see the much more complicated patterns that we have. And then you have very dramatic days like this one, when we had Hurricane Isaac. And you really get the sense that, you know, it's making landfall. This was interesting. We were watching the hurricane, and we got emails, you know, people saying, I'm in Baton Rouge right now, and looking at your map and just hoping that this just goes away, just passes, just we're done with this. Another day that was quite dramatic was obviously Hurricane Sandy, and you could see that really all the action that day in the country was on the west side, on the east side, sorry. And you can really see the eye of the hurricane there. So one of the things that was so exciting to us was that we had no idea what these maps looked like before, and we had no idea about the variety of patterns that we would see every day. The other thing that was interesting was the response we got. We thought that this was sort of a geeky project. Yeah, it's wind, it's interesting, but really, just weather, you know, enthusiasts are going to look at this. And it's not. So we got a lot of responses from bird watchers who were interested in tracking bird migration, butterfly migration. We got a lot of email from professionals who were like, look, I've been working with this kind of data for 28 years, and this gives me new intuition for the data. And I think that's really interesting, because wind maps have been available for the longest time. But maybe it's part of the reason they're not, you know, animated. I don't know. We got pilots, surfers, sailors, firefighters talking to us. This person is saying, I'm a pilot, and you have, with one simple map, utterly destroyed what the government provides to pilots for pre-flight planning. With just a little more information on your wind map, could be an amazing resource for pilots. We started getting a lot of email like this from pilots, to the point where we actually put a disclaimer on our project saying, please do not fly an airplane, do not fight wildfires. We try to be accurate, but this is just, you know, an art piece. It's not anything more than that. And so this is the last project. I'm gonna stop here, but I feel like this is a good illustration of the theme that I started in the beginning, which is, look at how mainstream we've come. We've come mainstream enough that we've had to attach a disclaimer to our project, because so many different audiences were trying to use it for different purposes. It's very exciting, and I think it's quite pivotal to be talking about information visualization right now. It's a whole spectrum. It's all the way from trying to tackle big data with things like data visualization, to telling stories, and to have kids learn what it means to deal with data. And so it's extremely exciting, and I hope that, you know, politically, academically, educationally, we figure out what it means to be expressive with this new medium that we have. Thank you.